I stood at the dam controls, my hand resting on the cold metal wheel that would change everything. The morning sun reflected off the water behind me, creating diamonds of light that danced across the surface of the reservoir. Below in the valley I could see them. 10 luxury houses standing proud and illegal on my land. Brandon's empire built on lies and theft. Built on my property. My phone buzzed. Another message from my lawyer. Are you sure about this, Naomi? Once you do it, there's no going back. I typed back quickly. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. But I wasn't at the dam yet. Not really. That moment would come. First, I needed to remember how I got here. How a woman who believed in love and trust ended up standing at a dam, preparing to watch her ex-husband's dreams wash away. It started 18 months ago on a Tuesday afternoon that seemed like any other day. I came home early from work. My head was pounding and I just wanted to lie down in our bedroom, maybe take some medicine and rest. Brandon had said he was working from home that day, handling some real estate deals. I figured he'd be in his office on calls like always. Our house was quiet when I walked in. Too quiet. I remember thinking it was strange that his car was in the driveway, but I couldn't hear his voice anywhere. Usually, when Brandon was on business calls, you could hear him from anywhere in the house. He had that big booming voice that filled every room. I walked upstairs, each step creaking slightly under my feet. The bedroom door was half open. I pushed it wider. That's when my whole world stopped. Brandon was in our bed. But he wasn't alone. Candace, my friend since college, was wrapped around him like she belonged there. They didn't even hear me at first. They were too busy with each other, too lost in their betrayal to notice I was standing there, watching my marriage die in real time. I must have made a sound because Brandon's head snapped toward the door. His eyes went wide, but not with guilt. With annoyance. Like I was interrupting something important. Naomi, he said, not even bothering to cover himself or Candace. We need to talk. Candace had the decency to look embarrassed, pulling the sheet up to cover herself. But she didn't leave. She didn't apologize. She just sat there in my bed in my house like she had every right to be there. How long? I asked. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant and cold. Does it matter? Brandon swung his legs out of bed and pulled on his pants. Look, Naomi, this isn't working anymore. You and me. It hasn't been working for a long time. How long? I repeated louder this time. 2 years, Candace said quietly from the bed. We've been together for 2 years. 2 years. While I was working 60-hour weeks to help pay for this house. While I was planning our future, talking about maybe starting a family. While I was trusting both of them, loving both of them, they were betraying me. I want a divorce, Brandon said like he was ordering coffee. Casual. Simple. Final. I looked at him, really looked at him, and wondered how I never saw it before. The late nights he claimed were work meetings. The business trips that seemed to multiply. The way he pulled away whenever I tried to be close to him. All the signs were there and I had ignored every single one. Get out, I said. This is my house too, Brandon replied, crossing his arms. I paid for half of it. Get out. I screamed it this time, and something in my voice must have convinced him because he grabbed his shirt and wallet and headed for the door. Candace scrambled to get dressed, avoiding my eyes the whole time. At the doorway, Brandon turned back. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow. I want this done quickly and cleanly. We can split everything 50-50, sell the house, divide the accounts. You keep your land, I keep my business. Fair is fair. Then he left. Just walked out of our bedroom, out of our house, out of our marriage like the past 8 years meant nothing at all. I stood there for a long time, staring at our bed, at the wrinkled sheets that still smelled like his cologne and her perfume. I thought about all the plans we made, all the dreams I had. I thought about the woman I was an hour ago, who believed her life was stable and secure. That woman was gone now. I stripped the bed, threw everything into garbage bags and dragged them to the curb. Then I called my sister and I cried. I cried until there were no tears left, until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen shut. The next morning I woke up on the couch. My phone was full of messages. From my sister asking if I was okay. From my mom, saying she was driving up to stay with me. From Brandon's lawyer with a formal notice of divorce proceedings. And one from Candace. I'm sorry it happened this way. But we're in love, Naomi. You have to understand. I deleted it without responding. What was there to say? That I understood? I didn't. I never would. The divorce papers arrived that afternoon. Brandon was asking for half of everything, including half the value of my grandmother's land in the valley. The land that had been in my family for 3 generations. The land my grandmother left to me specifically, in her will because she trusted me to take care of it. I called a lawyer that same day. A woman named Patricia Chin who came highly recommended and didn't waste time with sympathy. She looked over Brandon's demands and shook her head. He has no legal claim to your inherited property, she said. That land was yours before the marriage. He can't touch it. Good, I said. Because he's not getting 1 inch of it. The divorce took 4 months. 4 months of lawyers and negotiations and Brandon trying every trick to get more money. He claimed he contributed to the marriage and deserved compensation. He claimed I owed him for the years he supported me while I finished my engineering degree. I had receipts for everything. Every dollar I earned, every bill I paid. My lawyer presented it all to the judge, showing that I had actually contributed more financially to our marriage than Brandon had. His claims fell apart under scrutiny. In the end, the settlement was simple. He got the house and his business. I got my savings, my car, and my grandmother's land. No alimony either way. Clean break. I signed the papers on a Friday afternoon and moved out that same weekend. My sister helped me pack my things, carefully avoiding the bedroom where it all went wrong. We loaded up a moving truck and drove to a small apartment across town. You're going to be okay, my sister said as we unloaded boxes. Better than okay. You're going to be amazing. I wanted to believe her. But that night, alone in my new apartment with boxes stacked around me, I felt anything but amazing. I felt broken and used and stupid for not seeing what was right in front of me. But I also felt something else. Something that started as a tiny spark in my chest and grew warmer every day. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind that makes you do stupid things. The cold, calculated kind that makes you think clearly. The kind that makes you plan. I spent the next 6 months building my life back. I started a consulting business using my engineering degree, working with construction companies to improve their efficiency. The work was good, and it kept me busy enough that I didn't have time to think about Brandon or Candace or what they did to me. My business grew faster than I expected. Turns out, a lot of companies needed someone who understood both the technical side of construction and the practical side of making things work on a budget. I was good at it and word spread quickly. I made new friends, women who didn't betray me. I renovated my apartment, making it feel like home instead of just a place to sleep. I started running in the mornings, getting strong and healthy. I was building something real, something that belonged only to me. But I never forgot about my land in the valley. The 40 acres my grandmother left me, with the creek running through it and the old growth trees she protected for decades. It was beautiful land, untouched and peaceful. I drove out there one Saturday morning, 6 months after the divorce was finalized. I wanted to walk the property, maybe think about what to do with it eventually. My grandmother always dreamed of it being used for something meaningful, something that would help people while protecting the natural beauty. That's when I saw them. Construction vehicles, bulldozers and excavators, piles of lumber and concrete, and foundation holes, 10 of them dug deep into my land. Someone was building houses on my property, and I didn't need to guess who. I parked my car and walked across the torn-up earth, my heart pounding. A construction foreman saw me and walked over. "Can I help you?" he asked. "This is my land," I said. "Who authorized this construction?" He pulled out a clipboard. "We have permits from the county. This development was approved 6 months ago. The owner is Brandon Coal Development Company." Brandon. My ex-husband was building on my land. The land he had no rights to. The land the divorce settlement clearly stated was mine alone. I took pictures of everything. The equipment, the foundations, the permits. Then I drove straight to my lawyer's office. Patricia looked at the photos and made a call to the county. When she hung up, her face was grim. "Someone filed permits using forged documents that claimed Brandon still had property rights," she said. "The county approved them because the paperwork looked legitimate." "Can we stop the construction?" I asked. "Yes, but it will take time. We need to prove the documents were forged, get a court order, and then enforce it. Could be weeks, maybe months. And in the meantime? In the meantime, they'll keep building." I sat back in my chair, feeling that cold anger burn brighter. Brandon thought he could steal from me. He thought I would just let it happen, that I was too weak or too broken to fight back. He was wrong. "Let them build," I said quietly. Patricia looked at me confused. "What? Let them build? Don't stop the construction yet. I need time to think." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Something in my expression must have told her I had a plan. I did have a plan. It was forming in my mind piece by piece. But I needed to be smart about it. I needed to be careful. That night, I went home and pulled out every document my grandmother left me when she died. The deed to the land. The surveys. The water rights. Water rights. I read through the papers again slowly this time. My grandmother's property included partial ownership of an old irrigation dam upstream from the valley. The dam that controlled water flow to several properties, including mine. I smiled for the first time in months. Brandon wanted to build his empire on my land? Fine. Let him build. Let him invest every dollar he had. Let him finish those houses and plan his grand opening. Because when he did, I would be standing at that dam. And I would open it. The divorce proceedings started exactly the way Brandon's lawyer promised. Quickly and cleanly. Except it was neither of those things. I sat in Patricia's office 2 days after Brandon left, still numb from the shock. My sister came with me because I couldn't trust myself to make decisions alone. Everything felt unreal, like I was watching my life happen to someone else. They're asking for 50% of all marital assets, Patricia said, sliding a document across her desk. Including 50% of the appraised value of your grandmother's land. No. The word came out sharp and clear. That land isn't marital property. My grandmother left it to me 5 years before I even met Brandon. I know. But his lawyer is arguing that you made improvements to the property during the marriage using marital funds, therefore Brandon has a stake in its increased value. I thought about the work I did on that land. Clearing some brush. Fixing the old fence line. Maybe $3,000 total, all from my own paycheck. I have bank statements showing every penny came from my separate account, I said. The account I had before we got married. Patricia smiled. Good. We'll need all of that. Bank statements, receipts, anything that shows what money was yours alone and what was joint. The next 3 weeks were spent gathering paperwork. I had kept everything because my grandmother taught me to keep records. Every deposit slip, every check, every receipt. My sister helped me organize it all into folders, creating a timeline of my financial independence. Brandon's lawyer tried to paint me as someone who benefited from the marriage, who used Brandon's success to build my own career, who owed him for his support. It was garbage, but it hurt anyway. 8 years of my life reduced to legal arguments about who deserved what. We had our first mediation session in March. I walked into that conference room and saw Brandon for the first time since he left. He looked good. Too good. New haircut, expensive suit, and Candace sitting beside him like she had every right to be there. My hands shook, but I kept my face blank. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. Naomi, Brandon nodded at me like we were business acquaintances. Thanks for being reasonable about this. Reasonable. The man who cheated on me with my friend, who destroyed our marriage, who was now trying to steal my inheritance, thought I should be reasonable. Let's just get this done, I said, sitting across from them. The mediator, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, opened a file. We're here to discuss the division of assets in the divorce of Brandon Cole and Naomi Harper. Let's start with the house. The house. Our house. The one we bought together, planning to raise kids there someday. The one I painted room by room, choosing colors we both liked. The one that no longer felt like home. I don't want the house, I said. He can have it. Brandon looked surprised. His lawyer looked even more surprised. They had probably expected a fight. The outstanding mortgage is $200,000, Patricia said. Naomi wants Brandon to refinance in his name alone and release her from the loan obligation. In exchange, she gives up any claim to equity. That's acceptable, Brandon's lawyer said quickly. Too quickly. They had been prepared to offer me money to give up the house. The cars, the mediator continued. Naomi drives a 2019 Honda. Brandon drives a 2021 BMW. I keep my car, he keeps his, I said. Everyone agreed. This was going faster than expected. Joint accounts, the mediator said. There's approximately $40,000 in savings and checking combined. Split it, I said. $20,000 each. Brandon nodded. His lawyer made notes. Retirement accounts. Naomi has a 401k with $75,000. Brandon has an IRA with $60,000. Each keeps their own, I said. Wait, Brandon's lawyer interrupted. My client contributed to the household expenses while Naomi was building her retirement account. He has a claim to a portion. I pulled out a folder. I have 8 years of bank statements showing my contributions to household expenses. I paid 55% of all bills throughout our marriage. If we're talking about contributions, I should be getting money from him, not the other way around. Patricia pushed copies of the statements across the table. I watched Brandon's lawyer flip through them, his confident expression fading. Fine, he said. Each keeps their own retirement. We moved through the smaller items quickly. Furniture divided evenly. No one fought over the couch or the dining table. Wedding gifts went to whoever received them from their side of the family. Then we got to the land. My client is asking for 50% of the appreciated value of the property known as Harper Valley, Brandon's lawyer said. The land was appraised at $300,000 before the marriage and is now worth approximately $600,000. My client is entitled to half the increase, which is $150,000. No, Patricia said firmly. The property was inherited by Ms. Harper prior to the marriage. It is her separate property under state law. Furthermore, the increase in value is due to market conditions in the area, not improvements made during the marriage. My client helped maintain the property, Brandon's lawyer argued. When? I asked, my voice cutting through the legal talk. When did you ever help with that land, Brandon? You never even wanted to visit it. You called it a waste of space. Brandon's face flushed. I supported you. I gave you time to take care of it. You didn't give me anything. I worked full-time and took care of the property on weekends. You were too busy with your business. And with Candace. The room went silent. Candace shifted in her seat, looking uncomfortable. She should be uncomfortable. Let's stay focused on the assets, the mediator said diplomatically. The land is mine, I said clearly. It was mine before we married. It's mine now. He gets nothing from it. Brandon's lawyer tried to argue, citing cases and precedents. Patricia countered with her own cases. They went back and forth for an hour while I sat there, getting angrier by the minute. Finally, the mediator called a break. Patricia and I went to a small conference room down the hall. They're pushing because they think you'll cave, she said. They think you're emotional and vulnerable and willing to give up money just to end this. I'm not giving him $1 from that land, I said. Good. Because legally he has no claim. If we go to a judge, you'll win. They know it. This is a negotiating tactic. We went back into mediation. Brandon's lawyer made a new offer. They would drop the claim on the land if I gave up my share of the savings account. No, I said. I earned that money. Half is mine. More arguing. More legal terms thrown around. My head started to hurt, but I didn't back down. Finally, at 6 p.m, we reached an agreement. Brandon got the house, his car, his retirement account, and half the savings. I got my car, my retirement account, half the savings, and the land. No alimony. No further claims. We'll draw up the final papers, the mediator said. You'll need to sign them and file with the court. I nodded, exhausted. Patricia gathered our files and we left. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine. It was done. My marriage was officially over, reduced to a list of assets divided down the middle. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt empty. My phone rang. My mom. How did it go? She asked. It's done. I kept the land. Good. That land is your future, baby. Your grandmother knew what she was doing when she left it to you. I drove back to my apartment, ordered takeout, and fell asleep on the couch with the TV on. The next morning, I woke up with new determination. The divorce wasn't final yet, but it would be soon. Time to start building my new life. I threw myself into my work. My consulting business needed attention, and I gave it everything I had. I reached out to old contacts from my engineering days, let them know I was available for projects. Word spread fast. Within a month, I had 3 clients. Within 2 months, I was hiring a part-time assistant. The work was challenging and satisfying in a way my marriage never was. I also joined a gym and started taking boxing classes. There was something therapeutic about hitting things, about feeling strong and capable. The instructor, a woman named Rita, pushed us hard. Women need to know they're powerful, she said during one class. Not just physically, mentally, emotionally. You're all stronger than you think. I believed her. The final divorce papers came in late May. I signed them in Patricia's office, my hand steady. Brandon signed them the same day. The judge approved everything a week later. I was officially divorced. My sister took me out to dinner to celebrate. To new beginnings, she said, raising her glass. To new beginnings, I echoed. But even as I smiled and clinked glasses, part of my mind was already thinking about the land. About what Brandon might be planning. About the inheritance I fought so hard to keep. I didn't know yet that Brandon was already moving against me. That he had filed paperwork with the county weeks ago. That by the time I signed those divorce papers, construction permits were already approved for my property. I didn't know that my new beginning was about to become a war. But I would find out soon enough. Summer arrived hot and dry. I spent most of June working on a major project for a commercial developer who needed someone to redesign their warehouse efficiency. The job paid well and kept me busy 12 hours a day. It was exactly what I needed. My apartment started feeling like home. I bought new furniture, hung paintings I actually liked, and set up a small office in the second bedroom. Some nights, I would sit on my balcony with a glass of wine and think about how different my life looked now compared to 6 months ago. Different but better. I was making my own money, making my own decisions, living life on my own terms. No more compromising on what I wanted to watch on TV or where to go for dinner. No more pretending to enjoy Brandon's boring business dinners with people who only cared about money. I was free. On the last Saturday in June, I decided to visit the land. I hadn't been out there since the divorce was finalized, and I wanted to walk the property, maybe start thinking about what to do with it. My grandmother always dreamed of turning it into something meaningful. She talked about an education center where kids could learn about nature. Or maybe a retreat space for women who needed a place to heal. She never got to make those dreams real, but maybe I could. I drove out early, stopping for coffee on the way. The valley was beautiful in summer, with wildflowers blooming along the roadside and the mountains rising in the distance. This land had been in my family for 3 generations, and I felt that history with every mile. The dirt road leading to the property was rougher than I remembered. I slowed down, not wanting to damage my car on the ruts and rocks. Around the final bend, the valley opened up before me, and my heart stopped. The land was destroyed. Where there should have been open meadow and scattered trees, there were bulldozer tracks and piles of dirt. The creek I used to play in as a child was diverted into new channels. Trees were gone, ripped out and stacked like garbage. And everywhere there was construction. I stopped the car in the middle of the road, my hands frozen on the steering wheel. This couldn't be real. This had to be a mistake. Maybe I took a wrong turn, ended up on someone else's property. But no. There was the old oak tree my grandmother planted when she first bought the land. There was the rock formation that looked like a sleeping bear. This was my property. And someone was building on it. I drove forward slowly, taking in the destruction. 10 foundation holes, each one massive, dug deep into the earth. Concrete forms were already in place for several of them. Stacks of lumber sat wrapped in plastic. Portable toilets lined one edge of the site. This wasn't just random construction. This was a major development. A construction trailer sat near the entrance. I parked next to it and got out, my legs shaking. A man in a hard hat emerged from the trailer, walkie-talkie in hand. "Help you?" he asked, not friendly but not hostile either. "This is my land," I said, my voice coming out stronger than I felt. "Who authorized this construction?" He frowned. "We have all the permits. Let me get the foreman." A minute later, a heavy-set man in his 50s walked over, clipboard in hand. "I'm Mike Torres, site foreman. There a problem?" "Yes, there's a problem. This is my property. I own this land. I never gave anyone permission to build here." Mike looked genuinely confused. He flipped through papers on his clipboard. "Ma'am, we have county permits for this development. Everything was approved 6 months ago. The property owner is listed as Brandon Coal Development Company." Brandon. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Brandon. My ex-husband was building on my land. "Let me see those permits," I said. Mike hesitated, then handed me the clipboard. I read through the documents, my anger building with every line. The permits were dated 4 months ago, right in the middle of our divorce. The property was listed as belonging to Brandon Coal Development Company. The signature on the ownership documents looked like mine, but I never signed anything. "These documents are forged," I said. "I never signed this. This land was awarded to me in my divorce settlement. It's legally mine." Mike took the clipboard back. "Look, lady, I don't know anything about your divorce. I just know we have legal permits from the county. If there's an issue with ownership, you need to take it up with them and with our client. Your client is my ex-husband, and he's building on my property illegally. If it's illegal, get a court order. Until then, we have jobs to do." He walked away, leaving me standing there among the destruction of my grandmother's land. I got back in my car and took pictures of everything. Every foundation hole, every piece of equipment, every permit number I could see. Then I called Patricia. "Naomi?" she answered on the second ring. "What's wrong?" "Brandon is building on my land. Right now. There are 10 houses being built on my property." Silence on the other end. Then, "Are you sure it's your land?" "I'm standing here right now. It's definitely my land. They have county permits that claim Brandon owns it." "That's impossible." The divorce settlement was clear. "I'll call the county on Monday and find out what happened." "Monday?" My voice rose. "They're destroying everything right now, Patricia. There are bulldozers here. Trees are gone. The creek is diverted. Monday might be too late. I understand. But county offices are closed on weekends. First thing Monday morning, I'll file an emergency motion for an injunction. We'll stop the construction. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to Brandon's house and confront him. But instead, I took deep breaths and tried to think clearly. What should I do now? I asked. Document everything. Take pictures and videos. Don't talk to the construction crew anymore. And definitely don't do anything that could be seen as interfering with the construction. We need to handle this legally. I spent the next 2 hours walking the property, documenting every bit of damage. The old apple trees my grandmother planted were gone. The natural spring that fed the creek was covered with construction equipment. The meadow where I used to lie in the grass and watch clouds was now a grid of foundation holes. By the time I left, I was crying. Not sad tears, but tears of pure rage. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the destroyed land, kept thinking about Brandon's arrogance. He thought he could take whatever he wanted. He thought I was too weak to stop him. Monday morning, I met Patricia at her office at 7. She already had coffee brewing and files spread across her desk. I called the county first thing, she said. They confirmed that permits were issued for a development on your property 6 months ago. The paperwork shows Brandon Coal Development Company as the owner, with documents transferring ownership from you to the company. Documents I never signed, I said. I told them that. They're investigating, but it could take weeks. The permits were properly filed and approved. Until we can prove they're fraudulent, they remain valid. So he just gets to keep building? Not if I can help it. I filed an emergency motion this morning for a temporary restraining order. The hearing is scheduled for Thursday. If the judge agrees there's a question about ownership, he'll order construction stopped pending a full investigation. Thursday was 4 days away. 4 more days of construction on my land. What are the chances the judge will grant the restraining order? I asked. Patricia hesitated. Honestly? 50-50. We have to prove that you'll suffer irreparable harm if construction continues. Brandon's lawyers will argue that any damage can be compensated financially after the ownership issue is resolved. They're destroying my grandmother's land. How do you put a price on that? I know. And that's exactly what I'll tell the judge. The hearing on Thursday was a disaster. Brandon's lawyers showed up with a team of 3 attorneys, all in expensive suits. They presented the county permits, the ownership documents, and argued that the construction was legal based on properly filed paperwork. I testified about my ownership, about the divorce settlement, about never signing any transfer documents. Patricia presented the divorce decree showing I was awarded the land. The judge, an older man who looked tired of everyone's arguments, asked to see the ownership transfer documents. He studied them for a long time. These appear to be properly notarized, he said. The signature looks consistent with other documents in the file. It's not my signature, I said. Someone forged it. That's a serious accusation, the judge replied. Do you have a handwriting expert who can verify this? Patricia stood. We're in the process of retaining an expert, Your Honor. But that takes time. In the meantime, my client's property is being damaged every day construction continues. Brandon's lead attorney, a sharp-faced woman named Collins, spoke up. Your Honor, this is clearly a case of buyer's remorse. Ms. Harper signed documents transferring the property as part of a private business agreement with Mr. Cole before their divorce. Now she's trying to back out of that agreement by claiming the documents are fake. That's a lie, I said, standing up. There was no agreement. I never sold him anything. The judge banged his gavel. Ms. Harper, sit down. This is not a trial. This is a hearing to determine if there's sufficient cause to halt construction temporarily. I sat down, my face burning. The judge looked at all the paperwork again. I'm not prepared to issue a restraining order based on what I see here. The permits appear valid. The ownership documents appear legitimate. If Ms. Harper believes they're fraudulent, she can pursue that through proper channels. But I'm not going to shut down a legal construction project based on allegations alone. Your Honor, Patricia tried again, but the judge cut her off. Motion denied. Next case. And just like that, it was over. Outside the courthouse, I sat on a bench and put my head in my hands. Brandon walked past with his lawyers, Candace on his arm. He didn't even look at me. We'll keep fighting, Patricia said, sitting beside me. We'll get a handwriting expert. We'll prove the documents are fake. We'll get the county to revoke the permits. How long will that take? Months. Maybe longer if they fight us on everything. By then, the houses will be finished. Patricia didn't argue because we both knew it was true. I drove back to the land that afternoon. The construction crew was back at work, pouring concrete for one of the foundations. The sound of machinery filled the valley that used to be silent except for birds and wind. I sat in my car and watched them destroy my grandmother's legacy, piece by piece. And I realized something important. The legal system was too slow. By the time we proved the documents were fake, by the time we got the permits revoked, Brandon would have finished building. He would have invested millions into the development. And then what? Would they make him tear the houses down? Probably not. More likely they'd just make him pay me compensation. But I didn't want compensation. I wanted my land back. I wanted him to lose everything he built on my property. And suddenly I knew there had to be another way. A way that didn't rely on judges or lawyers or systems that moved too slowly to help me. I just had to figure out what that way was. I hired a private investigator the next morning. His name was James Wu, and he came recommended by Patricia's firm. Former police detective, now running his own agency. He met me at a coffee shop near my apartment. "Tell me what you need," he said, pulling out a notebook. I explained everything. The divorce, the land, the construction. The permits that used my forged signature. Brandon and Candace's involvement. "I need to know how he did it," I said. "How he got those permits. Who helped him. What his plan is. Everything." James made notes while I talked. When I finished, he looked up. "This is going to take time. And it won't be cheap. I charge $150 an hour plus expenses. I don't care what it costs. I need to know what I'm up against." "Fair enough. I'll start with the county records, see who filed the original permits and what documents they submitted. Then I'll look into Brandon's business, his partners, his finances. Give me 2 weeks." 2 weeks felt like forever, but I agreed. James left to start his investigation, and I went back to trying to live my normal life. Except nothing felt normal anymore. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects to pay for the legal fees and investigation costs. My consulting business was doing well, but the expenses were adding up fast. Patricia's firm was billing me $10,000 a month. James would cost at least another $6,000 for his investigation. And I still had my regular bills to pay. At night, I would lie awake and think about the land. About my grandmother's voice telling me stories of her childhood there. About the oak tree she planted when she was 25. About the creek where my mother learned to swim. All of it being destroyed so Brandon could make money. During the day, I would drive out to the property and take pictures. I documented every stage of construction, watching as the foundations took shape and walls started going up. The houses were massive, each one at least 4,000 square feet. Luxury homes for wealthy buyers. I estimated Brandon was spending at least $2 million on construction. Maybe more. Which meant he expected to sell the houses for way more than that. My land was making him rich. 2 weeks later, James called me. "I have some information. Can you meet today?" We met at the same coffee shop. James had a thick folder of documents. "Your ex-husband is deeper in this than you thought," he said, spreading papers across the table. "Brandon Coal Development Company was formed 4 years ago, during your marriage. The company has built 6 previous developments around the county. Small projects mostly. This valley development is his biggest project yet." "Who else is involved?" I asked. "His partner in the company is Candace Morgan, your ex-friend. They're 50-50 partners." Of course they were. The betrayal went deeper than I thought. "The permits for your land were filed 6 months ago, right in the middle of your divorce proceedings," James continued. "The ownership documents submitted to the county show a transfer of property from you to Brandon Coal Development Company. The transfer is dated 3 years ago. But I never signed anything 3 years ago. I didn't even know Brandon was planning to start a development company. The signature on the transfer documents matches your signature on other official documents. Either someone got very good at forging your signature, or they used an old signature from something else and transferred it to these documents. Can we prove that?" I asked. "Maybe. I have a handwriting expert reviewing everything. But here's the thing. Even if we prove the signature is fake, it could take a year or more to get through all the legal proceedings. By then, the houses will be finished and sold." I felt my stomach sink. "So we can't stop them. Not through legal channels. Not fast enough." We sat in silence for a moment. Then James leaned forward. "There's more," he said. "I dug into Brandon's finances. He's heavily leveraged. He took out loans against his other properties to fund this development. If this project fails, he loses everything." "What do you mean, everything?" "His house. His other developments. His business. Everything. He's betting it all on this valley project." I thought about that. Brandon was risking everything he had built, which meant this development had to succeed. He had no backup plan. Do you know when he plans to sell the houses? I asked. James pulled out another document. According to the permits and construction timeline, the houses should be finished in 6 months. I found promotional materials for a grand opening event. He's planning a huge marketing push. Luxury valley living, exclusive development, limited availability. Starting prices of $800,000 per house. I did the math quickly. 10 houses at $800,000 each. That was $8 million in sales. Minus the $2 million for construction and probably another $1 million for land development and marketing costs. Brandon would make around $5 million in profit. $5 million. Built on my stolen land. There's one more thing, James said, pulling out a magazine mock-up. They're planning to announce it as a couple's project. Brandon and Candace building their future together. The whole romantic angle is part of the marketing. He showed me the promotional materials. Beautiful photos of the valley, descriptions of luxury living, and at the bottom, a photo of Brandon and Candace. The text said, "Built with love by Brandon Cole and Candace Morgan." I felt sick. I want to know everything about their timeline, I said. When each house will be finished. When they plan to open sales. Who their target buyers are. Everything. I can do that. But Naomi, I have to ask. What are you planning? I don't know yet. But I need to understand the full picture before I can figure out how to fight back. James studied me for a moment. Be careful. Whatever you're thinking, make sure it's legal. I can't help you if you cross lines. I'm not planning anything illegal. I just want justice. He nodded slowly. I'll keep digging. Give me another week. After James left, I sat in the coffee shop for a long time, thinking. Brandon had bet everything on this project. He was counting on those sales to pay off his loans and make him rich. The whole development was built on a foundation of fraud, but proving that fraud would take too long to matter. Unless I found a different way to make the development fail. I thought about water. The valley flooded sometimes in heavy rain. My grandmother told me stories about water flowing through in spring, fed by snowmelt from the mountains. But there hadn't been major flooding in decades. That night, I pulled out all my grandmother's old papers. Deeds, surveys, water rights documents. I read through everything carefully, looking for anything that might help. That's when I found it. Buried in the back of an old file folder, a document dated 1956. My great-grandfather's signature was at the bottom. Agreement for shared water rights and irrigation system management. My hands shook as I read through the legal language. The document gave my family partial ownership and control of an old irrigation dam upstream from the valley. The dam was built in the 1940s to control water flow for farming. Over the years, as farming declined, the dam fell into disuse. But the ownership rights remained. I had partial ownership of a dam that controlled water flow to my property. The next morning, I called a water rights attorney. She reviewed the documents and confirmed what I suspected. These rights are still valid, she said. The dam is technically under joint management of 3 families who owned land in the area. 2 of those families sold their land decades ago, but the water rights weren't explicitly transferred. Which means you might have majority control of dam operations. What does that mean practically? It means you have a legal right to manage water flow from that dam. Within certain boundaries, of course. You can't cause flooding that damages other properties. But you can control water flow to your own land. Even though someone else is building on my land right now? The water rights are separate from land ownership. Even if someone else claims to own the land, you still have water rights. They're 2 different legal issues. I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. Brandon built his entire development in a valley that I controlled the water supply to. He never checked the water rights. He never thought about the old dam. He just assumed he could build and everything would be fine. But I had control of the dam. And that dam could release a lot of water. I drove up to the dam the next day. It was old and not well maintained, but still functional. A small creek flowed out of it, controlled by a wheel valve that looked like it hadn't been turned in years. I called an engineer I knew from my consulting work. I need someone to assess an old dam. Tell me if it's functional and what would happen if the floodgates were opened. He met me at the dam 2 days later. We spent 3 hours examining the structure, the gates, the water flow channels. It's old but solid, he said finally. The gates can be opened. If you released all the water at once, you'd flood the valley downstream. How much flooding would depend on how much water is in the reservoir and how long you kept the gates open. Would it be dangerous? Would anyone get hurt? Not if you did it right. Give warning, make sure no one is in the valley. The water would flow through fast, cause some erosion and flooding, then drain away within a few hours. What about buildings? What would it do to houses? He looked at the valley below. Depends on the foundations. If they're not properly sealed against water, you could have serious damage. Flooding, foundation erosion, that kind of thing. But I'm not sure why you're asking. Just curious about the property. Thanks for your help. After he left, I stood at the dam for a long time looking down at the valley. At the 10 houses taking shape on my stolen land. I wasn't ready to open the dam yet. I needed to be sure. I needed to know that when I did this, it would accomplish what I wanted. And I needed to make sure it was legal. The water rights attorney confirmed I had the right to manage water flow. The engineer confirmed the dam was functional. James was gathering information about Brandon's timeline and finances. All the pieces were coming together. I just needed to wait for the right moment. Patricia filed a lawsuit in early September. Not just against Brandon, but against Brandon Coal Development Company, Candace Morgan, and the county for approving fraudulent permits. This is going to be a long fight, she warned me. Brandon has good lawyers and deep pockets. They'll fight us on every single motion. She was right. The legal battle became a war of attrition. Brandon's lawyers filed a motion to dismiss the lawsuit, claiming I had no standing because the permits were legally issued. We countered with evidence that the ownership documents were forged. They demanded proof from a handwriting expert. We hired an expert. She analyzed the signature on the transfer documents compared to my real signatures on other official papers. Her report was 40 pages long and concluded that the signature on the transfer was likely forged. Likely? I asked Patricia. Not definitely? Handwriting analysis isn't an exact science. She can say it's highly probable the signature is forged, but she can't be 100% certain. Brandon's lawyers will use that uncertainty to fight us. They did. They hired their own expert who said the signature looked authentic. Now we had 2 experts contradicting each other. The judge ordered a hearing to determine the validity of the signature. That hearing was scheduled for November, 3 months away. 3 months? I asked, incredulous. The houses will be almost finished by then. I know. But that's how the system works. We can ask for an expedited hearing, but there's no guarantee we'll get it. We asked. The request was denied. The court calendar was full. Meanwhile, construction continued. I drove out to the property every weekend and watched the houses take shape. Walls went up. Roofs went on. Windows were installed. They were beautiful houses, I had to admit. Large and modern with big windows facing the mountains. My grandmother's land was becoming someone else's dream. I focused on my business to stay sane. My consulting company was growing faster than I expected. I hired 2 full-time employees and moved into a small office space. The work was demanding but satisfying. At night, I would research water law and dam operations. I read everything I could find about irrigation systems, water rights, and legal uses of water control. I wanted to be absolutely sure that what I was planning was legal before I did anything. The water rights attorney confirmed again that I had the right to manage the dam. As long as you're not intentionally causing damage to other properties, you can control water flow to your own land. It's within your rights. What if the water flow causes incidental damage to structures on my land that I didn't authorize? She thought about that. That would be between you and whoever built those structures. If they built without your permission, they accepted the risk of existing conditions on the property, including water flow. In October, we had our first major court hearing. Both sides presented evidence about the signature. The handwriting experts testified. Brandon testified that he and I had an agreement for the property transfer, even though he couldn't produce any written agreement beyond the forged documents. I testified that no such agreement existed. That I never would have sold him my grandmother's land. That the signature wasn't mine. The judge listened to everything and then said he needed time to review the evidence. He would issue a ruling in 30 days. 30 more days of waiting. After the hearing, I saw Brandon and Candace in the courthouse hallway. They were talking with their lawyers, looking confident. Candace saw me and quickly looked away. But Brandon met my eyes. "You're wasting your time with this lawsuit," he said, walking over. "The permits are valid. The construction is legal. You're just mad because you didn't think of it first. You forged my signature and stole my land," I said quietly. "That's fraud. And you know it. Prove it in court." "Oh wait, you're trying. How's that working out for you?" "Brandon, come on," Candace said, pulling at his arm. "Let's go." But he didn't move. "You always were naive, Naomi. You think the world is fair. You think justice matters. But it doesn't. Money matters. Power matters. And I have both. For now, I said. Something in my voice made him pause. He studied my face like he was trying to figure out what I meant. Then he laughed. You can't touch me. You're just an ex-wife with a grudge. I'm building an empire. Empires fall, I said. He walked away, Candace beside him. I watched them go, my anger cold and clear. Patricia came up beside me. You okay? I'm fine. How long until the judge rules? 4 weeks, maybe less. Try not to think about it. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. The legal battle was consuming my life. Every day brought new motions, new arguments, new delays. Brandon's lawyers were good at dragging things out, at finding procedural issues that required more hearings. James called me in late October. I have the timeline for the development. The houses will be finished by the end of January. They're planning a grand opening event on February 10th. Press, buyers, the whole thing. They've already started marketing to potential buyers. Have they sold any houses yet? No. Brandon is waiting until they're completely finished. He wants buyers to see the final product. He thinks he'll get better prices that way. Which meant Brandon's money was still tied up in the development. He hadn't recouped any of his investment yet. If something went wrong before those sales closed, he would be in serious financial trouble. The judge's ruling came down in mid-November. I was at my office when Patricia called. We won the motion on the signature, she said. The judge agrees there's sufficient evidence that the signature on the transfer documents is likely forged. My heart leaped. So we can stop the construction? Not yet. The judge is ordering a full investigation by the county. They have to review all the permits and ownership documents. But he's not issuing a stop work order yet because construction is so far along. He doesn't want to cause unnecessary economic harm if it turns out the permits are eventually validated. What? How does that make sense? If the signature is forged, the permits are invalid. I know. But Brandon's lawyers argued that stopping construction now would cost millions. The judge wants more investigation before making that decision. The county has 60 days to complete their review. 60 days. By then, the houses would be finished. I hung up the phone and put my head on my desk. I was winning the legal battle, slowly. But too slowly to matter. That night, I drove up to the dam. I stood there in the dark, listening to water flow through the creek. The reservoir was full from fall rains. There was a lot of water behind that dam. I thought about my grandmother. About the stories she told me. About how she always said that sometimes you have to be patient, wait for the right moment, and then act decisively. The right moment was coming. I could feel it. I just had to wait a little longer. I decided to stop watching the construction. Driving out to the valley every weekend was making me bitter and angry, emotions that weren't helping me build my future. So I focused on what I could control, my business. My consulting company, Harper Engineering Solutions, was thriving. Word spread quickly that I was good at solving complex problems efficiently. I had clients in 3 states now, all needing help with construction optimization, workflow improvements, and project management. In December, I hired 3 more employees. Janelle, a sharp recent graduate with a degree in civil engineering. Marcus, a project manager with 15 years of experience. And Beth, an administrative assistant who kept everything organized. We moved into a bigger office space in January. The new office had large windows overlooking downtown, a conference room for client meetings, and individual offices for everyone. I stood in my new office on the first day and felt genuine pride. I built this. Not with Brandon's help or anyone else's. This company was mine. To new beginnings, Janelle said at our office warming party, raising a glass of champagne. To new beginnings, everyone echoed. My personal life was improving too. I joined a book club and made friends with women who had their own careers and lives. We met every other Tuesday to discuss books and ended up talking about everything else. Relationships, work, family, dreams. One of the women, Angela, owned a small bakery. Another, Tanya, was a lawyer specializing in environmental cases. A third, Denise, taught at the local university. They were smart, independent, and supportive in ways Candace never was. You're doing amazing, Angela told me one evening after book club. Seriously, your ex-husband is an idiot for letting you go. He didn't let me go. He threw me away for someone else, I said. Then he's an even bigger idiot. His loss, your gain. I started dating again in January, though nothing serious. A few coffee dates, one dinner that went nowhere, and a hiking trip with a nice guy who talked too much about his ex-girlfriend. I wasn't ready for a relationship, and that was okay. I was learning to be happy alone. My sister visited in late January. We spent the weekend shopping, watching movies, and talking about everything that had happened in the past year. "You're different," she said Sunday morning over breakfast. "Stronger. More confident." "I had to be," I said. "Falling apart wasn't an option." "I'm proud of you. Mom is too. We were worried after the divorce, but you've handled everything so well." "I'm still handling it. The legal battle isn't over. But you're not letting it destroy you. That's what matters." She was right. A year ago, I was the woman who cried on her couch after discovering her husband's betrayal. Now I was the woman who ran her own successful business, had real friends, and was building a life she could be proud of. But I never forgot about the land. About Brandon's theft. About the empire he built on my stolen property. James called me in early February with an update. "The houses are finished. Brandon is having a final inspection this week. The grand opening is scheduled for February 10th as planned." "Have they sold any houses yet?" "Not officially. But they have interest from several buyers. Brandon expects to close sales on at least 5 houses within a month of the grand opening. 5 houses at $800,000 each. $4 million. Half Brandon's expected profit." "When is the grand opening event?" I asked. "Saturday, February 10th, starting at 2 in the afternoon. They're inviting potential buyers, local press, and some city officials. Brandon is planning to propose to Candace at the event." Of course he was. Make it a spectacle. Get attention for the development and for their relationship. "Are they doing tours of the houses?" I asked. "Yes. Open house style. Buyers can walk through all 10 houses, see the quality, imagine themselves living there." I thought about that. Brandon and Candace would be busy with guests, with press, with making their big announcement. They would be distracted. "Thanks, James. This is helpful. Naomi, whatever you're planning, please be careful." "I'm always careful." I called the water rights attorney the next day. "If I wanted to release water from the dam, what's the legal process?" "You'd need to file a notice with the county at least 48 hours in advance. The notice lets them know water levels will be changing. It's mainly for people downstream who might be affected." "Do I need permission to release the water?" "No. You own the water rights. You just need to give notice." "What if someone built structures in the path of the water flow without my permission?" "That's their problem. You're not responsible for unauthorized structures on your property. But you do need to make sure you're not intentionally causing damage. The water release has to be for a legitimate purpose." "What counts as a legitimate purpose?" "Irrigation, flood control, property maintenance. Cleaning out the irrigation channels would be legitimate. Testing the dam operation would be legitimate. Releasing excess water to prevent dam failure would be legitimate." I thought about that carefully. If I haven't released water from the dam in years and I need to clear out the channels to make sure they're still functional, that would be legitimate maintenance? Absolutely. Old irrigation systems need regular testing and maintenance to ensure they're safe and functional. And if I gave proper notice to the county, and the water flowing through my property happened to impact unauthorized construction, that wouldn't be my fault? The attorney was quiet for a moment. Then, "Naomi, I need to be clear. You can't use water rights as a weapon. If you're deliberately trying to damage someone's property, that's illegal, even if they built on your land without permission." "I understand. But if I'm doing legitimate maintenance on my dam and irrigation system, and someone else's unauthorized construction happens to be in the way, that's not my fault, right?" "Right. As long as your primary purpose is legitimate maintenance, and you give proper notice, you're within your rights." "Thank you. That's what I needed to know." I spent the next week planning carefully. I consulted with the engineer who assessed the dam to make sure everything would work properly. I reviewed all my grandmother's old documents about the irrigation system. I made sure I understood every legal aspect. On Wednesday, February 7th, I filed a notice with the county. Water release from Irrigation Dam 7 scheduled for Saturday, February 10th, beginning at 2 p.m. Purpose: system maintenance and channel clearing. Expected duration: 2 to 4 hours. The county clerk stamped the notice and filed it. It was public record now. Anyone who checked could see I was planning to release water. But who checks irrigation notices? Not Brandon. Not his development company. They were too busy preparing for their grand opening. Thursday and Friday, I gathered everything I would need. I made sure my car had a full tank of gas. I prepared a detailed timeline. I contacted Patricia and told her to be ready for phone calls over the weekend. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Legitimate property maintenance," I said. "Naomi, please tell me you're not doing anything illegal." "I'm not. I've consulted with 3 different attorneys. Everything I'm doing is completely legal and within my rights as a property owner. Why does that not make me feel better? Because you're a lawyer and you worry about everything. Trust me, Patricia. I know what I'm doing. Friday night, I barely slept. I kept running through the plan, checking every detail. The water rights were clear. The notice was filed. The purpose was legitimate. Everything was legal. At 6 on Saturday morning, I drove up to the dam. The sun was just rising, painting the sky pink and gold. The reservoir was full from winter rains. Behind that dam was enough water to fill the valley. I checked the gate mechanisms. The engineer had serviced everything last week, making sure it was all functional and safe. The wheel valve turned smoothly. The gates would open without any problems. I sat in my car and waited. At 10 I called James. It's happening today, I said. Brandon's grand opening is at 2. I'm releasing water from the dam at 2. Jesus, Naomi. Are you sure about this? I'm sure. I need you to be ready to document everything. I want photos of the development before and after. I want you to witness what happens. I'll be there. But Naomi, this could go wrong in a lot of ways. It won't. I've planned everything carefully. At noon, I drove down to a hilltop overlooking the valley. From here, I could see the entire development. All 10 houses, beautiful and complete, sitting in the valley below. I could see cars starting to arrive for the grand opening. Expensive cars. Potential buyers. A white tent was set up between the houses. Tables, chairs, a catering truck. Brandon and Candace were getting ready for their big day. I watched them through binoculars. Brandon in an expensive suit, shaking hands with people. Candace in a designer dress, smiling and playing the gracious hostess. They looked happy. Successful. They had no idea what was coming. At 1:30, I drove back up to the dam. I stood at the controls, my hand on the wheel valve that would open the gates. At 1:55, I took out my phone and started recording video. At 2 o'clock exactly, I began turning the wheel. The wheel was hard to turn at first. Years of rust and disuse made it stiff. But slowly it moved. I could hear the gates groaning as they opened. Water began to flow. At first just a trickle. Then more. And more. The sound grew from a whisper to a roar as thousands of gallons of water rushed through the opening gates and into the old irrigation channels below. I watched the water flow down the hillside, following the channels carved out decades ago by my great-grandfather. Channels that ran directly through my grandmother's land in the valley. Channels that Brandon never bothered to check before he started building. The irrigation system was designed to flood the valley for farming. That was its purpose. And it still worked perfectly. I recorded everything on my phone. The dam, the water release, the flow through the channels. All documented. All legal. Then I drove back down to my hilltop vantage point. James was already there with professional camera equipment. This is crazy, he said, but he was smiling. Brilliant but crazy. Just document everything, I said. We watched through binoculars as the water reached the valley. At first, people didn't notice. They were inside the houses, touring rooms, admiring finishes. The party was in full swing under the white tent. Then someone noticed water flowing across the ground. I saw them point, saw others turn to look. The flow was increasing now as more water came from the dam. The old irrigation channels did exactly what they were designed to do. They directed water through the property, spreading it across the valley floor. Right through the foundation holes where Brandon's houses sat. I watched as water began pooling around the foundations. The houses were sealed against rain, but they weren't designed for this much water. The irrigation system was meant to deliver thousands of gallons for farming. It did that perfectly. Water started seeping into foundation cracks. I saw it flowing into basement spaces through small gaps around pipes and cables. The houses weren't designed to be waterproof against sustained flooding. People started running out of the houses. I could see panic, could see Brandon trying to control the situation. Someone was on a phone, probably calling emergency services. But there was no emergency. This was controlled water release from a legal dam operation. I had filed proper notice. I was doing legitimate maintenance. The water kept coming for 2 hours exactly as I planned. 2 hours of continuous flow through those irrigation channels, flooding the valley just like it was designed to do. James took pictures of everything. The water flow. The flooding. The chaos at the development. Brandon arguing with someone who might have been a county official. Candace standing in her designer dress with water soaking her shoes. At 4 o'clock, I drove back up to the dam and closed the gates. The water flow stopped. Within 30 minutes, the valley started draining. The irrigation channels carried excess water away naturally, just like they were designed to do. I drove home, exhausted but satisfied. That evening, James sent me his photos. The development was a disaster. Water had flooded basements, soaked insulation, damaged drywall. Foundations were cracked from the water pressure. Landscaping was destroyed. Brandon's empire, built on stolen land, was drowning. Sunday morning, my phone started ringing early. Patricia called first. "What did you do?" she asked. "Legitimate dam maintenance. I filed proper notice with the county on Wednesday. Everything was legal. Brandon is threatening to sue you for property damage. He can try. But he can't sue me for damage to structures he built illegally on my property without permission. Especially when I gave proper notice about water release and he ignored it." Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed. "You planned this carefully, didn't you?" "Very carefully. I consulted with 3 different attorneys. The water release was legal. The purpose was legitimate. The notice was properly filed. And if Brandon's illegal structures were damaged, that's his problem. He's claiming you did it on purpose to sabotage his development. Can he prove that? My primary purpose was system maintenance. I haven't released water from that dam in 5 years. The irrigation channels needed to be cleared and tested. That's legitimate property maintenance. And the timing? The fact that you did it during his grand opening? Coincidental. I filed the notice days in advance. If he had bothered to check county records, he would have seen it coming. His failure to monitor public notices about water releases isn't my fault." Patricia laughed again. "You're brilliant. Infuriating but brilliant. What happens now? Now we wait and see what he does." What Brandon did was call the police. By Sunday afternoon, I had 2 officers at my door. "Ms. Harper? We need to ask you some questions about yesterday's incident at the Valley Development." "Come in," I said calmly. "Would you like coffee?" They declined. We sat in my living room while they asked questions about the water release. I answered everything honestly. Yes, I released water from the dam. Yes, I knew there was a development in the valley. Yes, I knew my ex-husband built it. No, I didn't do it to damage his property. I did it for legitimate maintenance of an irrigation system I'm responsible for. Yes, I filed proper notice with the county. No, I had no way of knowing whether anyone would check that notice. "Mr. Cole says you did this deliberately to sabotage his business," one officer said. "Mr. Cole built 10 houses on my property without permission using forged documents. There's an active lawsuit about it. The structures were built illegally on land I own. I was conducting legitimate maintenance on my water rights. If his illegal structures were damaged, that's not my responsibility." The officers looked at each other. "This sounds like a civil matter," one said. "Property disputes aren't usually criminal unless there's clear intent to commit a crime. I committed no crime. I exercised my legal rights as a property owner." They asked a few more questions, took notes, and left. "Someone from the district attorney's office might contact you," they said. "But this looks like a civil issue, not criminal." After they left, I called the water rights attorney. The police came to my house asking questions. "Did you answer them?" "Yes. I told them the truth. Everything I did was legal." "Good. If the district attorney calls, refer them to me. But I don't think they'll pursue anything. You followed all the rules. You filed proper notice. You have legitimate water rights. The fact that someone built on your property without permission isn't your problem." Monday morning, I went to work like normal. My employees knew something had happened over the weekend, but I didn't discuss it. This was my personal business, separate from the company. That afternoon, Patricia called. "Brandon filed for an emergency restraining order to prevent you from releasing any more water from the dam." "On what grounds?" "Property damage. He's claiming you're using water rights as a weapon." "When's the hearing?" "Tomorrow at 2. Can you be there?" "I'll be there." Tuesday, I walked into the courtroom ready for a fight. Brandon was there with his lawyers. Candace sat behind him, looking exhausted. I saw dark circles under her eyes, worry lines on her face. She should be worried. Brandon's lead attorney stood up. "Your Honor, this is a clear case of malicious property damage disguised as maintenance. Ms. Harper deliberately released water from a dam during my client's grand opening event, destroying months of work and causing hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage." The judge looked at me. "Ms. Harper, how do you respond?" Patricia stood. "Your Honor, Ms. Harper owns water rights to that dam. She filed proper notice with the county as required by law 48 hours before the water release. The purpose of the release was legitimate maintenance of an irrigation system that hasn't been used in 5 years. The fact that Mr. Cole built structures on Ms. Harper's property without permission, and that those structures were damaged by illegal water flow, is not Ms. Harper's responsibility. She did it on purpose. Brandon burst out. She wanted to sabotage my development. The judge banged his gavel. Mr. Cole, control yourself. Patricia continued. Mr. Cole is currently being sued for fraud, forgery, and trespassing related to this development. He built on property he doesn't own using forged documents. Any damage to his structures occurred because he chose to build in the path of a legally operating irrigation system on someone else's property. Brandon's lawyer tried to argue that I should have warned them directly. Patricia countered that filing public notice with the county was sufficient. I wasn't required to personally notify everyone who might be affected. The judge looked through all the documents. The water rights, the filed notice, the evidence of Brandon's forged permits. I'm not granting the restraining order, he said finally. Ms. Harper followed proper procedure for water release. She filed appropriate notice. The fact that Mr. Cole built structures without proper authorization from the actual property owner is not Ms. Harper's fault. If he wants to prevent future damage, he should stop building on property he doesn't own. Your Honor, Brandon's lawyer started to protest. Decision is final. This court is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, Brandon confronted me. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you won? I didn't do anything illegal, Brandon. Unlike you. Those houses are worth millions. You just destroyed millions of dollars in property. Property you built on my land using forged documents. How stupid do you have to be to build on someone else's property without checking water rights? His face went red. This isn't over. You're right. It's not. The county is still investigating your forged permits. The fraud charges are still pending. And your development is flooded. How are you going to sell those houses now? Who wants to buy a luxury home with a damaged foundation and water-soaked insulation? He didn't have an answer for that. He just turned and walked away, Candace following behind him. I drove back to my office feeling lighter than I had in months. Brandon's empire was crumbling. And it was all completely legal. The news about the flooded development spread quickly. Local media covered the story, initially portraying it as a disaster for the new development. But as more details emerged about the forged permits and property dispute, the narrative shifted. By Wednesday, headlines read, "Developer accused of building on stolen land," and "Luxury homes flooded in property rights dispute." James called me with updates. Brandon is scrambling. He's trying to repair the damage, but several buyers backed out after seeing the flooding. His insurance company is refusing to cover water damage because it resulted from a legal operation he should have anticipated. How bad is the damage? I asked. Bad enough. 3 of the houses need complete foundation repairs. All of them have water damage to some extent. He's looking at least $500,000 in repairs, probably more. And that's if he can get contractors to work on property with disputed ownership. Can he sell any of the houses? Not until the ownership issue is resolved. No title company will insure a sale when there's an active lawsuit about who actually owns the property. Which meant Brandon's money was tied up in 10 houses he couldn't sell and couldn't repair without investing more money he probably didn't have. Patricia called that afternoon. The county completed their investigation. They've revoked all the permits for Brandon's development. The ownership documents were confirmed to be fraudulent. They're referring the case to the district attorney for possible criminal charges. When will that happen? Could be months. But in the meantime, Brandon can't do any more construction on the property. And he has to either complete repairs using his own money without permits, or leave the houses as they are. What about getting him off my land completely? That's next. I'm filing a motion for immediate possession based on the fraudulent permits. With the county investigation complete, we have solid grounds. The judge should order Brandon to remove all structures from your property. How long will that take? Could be weeks, could be months. Depends on how much Brandon fights it. But we're in a much stronger position now. I hung up feeling satisfied. Brandon was trapped. His development was damaged, his permits were revoked, and he couldn't sell anything. Every day that passed cost him more money in loans, property taxes, and lost opportunities. Meanwhile, my business continued to grow. I landed a major contract with a regional construction firm, consulting on 5 different projects simultaneously. The work was demanding, but my team handled it well. You seem happier lately, Janelle commented during a team meeting. More relaxed. Things are coming together, I said. both personally and professionally. That weekend, I drove out to the valley for the first time since the flooding. I wanted to see the damage up close. The houses stood silent and damaged. Windows were broken where construction workers tried to pump water out. Landscaping was destroyed, just piles of mud and dead plants. Several foundations had visible cracks. I walked through my grandmother's land, away from the houses. In places where Brandon hadn't torn everything up, I could still see remnants of what it used to be. A few of my grandmother's apple trees survived. The creek, returned to its natural channel after the flooding, ran clear and strong. This land could be beautiful again. It would take work, but I could restore it. And when I did, I would build something meaningful here, something my grandmother would be proud of. My phone rang. Patricia. The judge granted our motion for possession, she said. Brandon has 60 days to remove all structures from your property. Remove them? All 10 houses? Yes. He built them on your land without authorization. They have to be demolished and removed. I thought about that. 10 massive houses, built with materials worth millions, reduced to rubble and hauled away. What if he doesn't comply? I asked. Then the county will demolish them and bill him for the cost. Either way, they're coming down. After we hung up, I sat in my car looking at the houses. Brandon invested everything in this development. His money, his time, his reputation. And now he would watch it all torn down. That night I couldn't sleep. Not from guilt, but from anticipation. Tomorrow, Patricia would serve Brandon with a court order. He would have 60 days to demolish his empire. And I would be there to watch. The story begins here where it was always meant to begin. At the dam, with my hand on the controls, preparing to release the water that would change everything. But you know this part now. You know about the wheel valve, the flowing water, the flooding valley. You know about Brandon's grand opening party destroyed by legal water release. What you don't know is what came after. The 60-day deadline arrived in April. Brandon hadn't removed the houses. He couldn't. He was buried in legal problems, fighting criminal fraud charges, dealing with angry investors, and watching his business collapse. On day 61, county demolition crews arrived at the valley. I drove out to watch, standing on my hilltop vantage point as heavy equipment rolled onto my property. James stood beside me. You sure you want to watch this? I'm sure. I need to see it. The first house came down in less than an hour. Excavators tore into walls, pulling down structures that took months to build. The sound of destruction echoed through the valley. One by one the houses fell. All 10 of them reduced to piles of rubble and broken dreams. Brandon showed up on the third day, standing at the edge of the demolition site. Even from a distance, I could see his shoulders slumped in defeat. He watched his empire being destroyed, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Candace wasn't with him. According to James, she left Brandon 2 weeks ago when the money ran out. She filed for dissolution of their business partnership and moved to another state. Brandon lost everything. His business, his money, his relationship. All of it gone. The demolition took 2 weeks. When it was done, the valley was scarred but empty. All traces of Brandon's development were hauled away. My land was mine again. I hired an environmental restoration company to help repair the damage. We replanted trees, restored the natural creek flow, and seeded native grasses across the torn-up earth. The district attorney charged Brandon with fraud, forgery, and theft. His trial was scheduled for September. He faced up to 10 years in prison if convicted. I didn't attend any of the court proceedings. I was done with Brandon. He was someone else's problem now. Instead, I focused on my future. On the land, on my business, on building something real and lasting. In June, I started planning what to build on my grandmother's land. Not houses for profit. Something meaningful. I designed an education center focused on environmental sustainability and conservation. A place where kids could learn about nature, where families could camp and hike, where people could come to heal and reconnect with the natural world. It would take years to build. Years of planning and fundraising and hard work. But that was okay. I had time. My business continued to thrive. By summer, I had 10 employees and clients in 5 states. Harper Engineering Solutions became known for solving complex problems efficiently and ethically. I also started dating someone new. His name was Jordan, a teacher at the local high school. We met at a friend's barbecue in July. He was kind and funny and had no interest in impressing anyone. We took things slowly, building friendship before romance. What's your story? He asked on our third date. How does someone become such a successful engineer? I told him about my grandmother, about the land, about building a business from nothing. I told him about the divorce, though I kept the revenge details vague. Sounds like you've had a tough year, he said. tough but good. I learned a lot about who I am and what I'm capable of. I like who you are, he said simply. We kept seeing each other. No pressure, no promises, just two people enjoying each other's company. By fall, construction started on the education center. Nothing major yet, just site preparation and foundation work. But seeing progress on my grandmother's land felt like coming full circle. Brandon's trial happened in September. He was convicted on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 7 years in prison and ordered him to pay restitution of $3 million to cover my legal fees and property restoration costs. He would never pay it all. He had declared bankruptcy in August. But the principle mattered more than the money. I didn't feel victorious when I heard the verdict. I felt tired. Tired of fighting, tired of anger, tired of looking backward. It was time to look forward. 1 year later, I stood in the valley on a beautiful October morning. The education center was nearly complete. A main building with classrooms and offices. A community center with kitchen facilities for events. Cabins for overnight guests. Walking trails through restored woodland. It was beautiful. More beautiful than anything Brandon could have built. The grand opening was scheduled for the following weekend. Local schools were sending students for the first environmental education programs. Families had booked cabins for the summer season. Everything I planned was coming together. Jordan stood beside me, his hand warm in mine. We'd been together for over a year now, building something real and lasting. No games, no betrayal, just genuine partnership. Your grandmother would be proud, he said. I hope so. This is what she always wanted for this land. My business was better than ever. I had 20 employees now, office space in 2 cities, and a reputation as one of the best consulting firms in the region. Success I built myself without depending on anyone else. My sister and mother came for the education center's opening weekend. We walked the trails together looking at everything I'd created. You did this all yourself, my mom said, her voice full of pride. After everything Brandon put you through, you didn't let it break you. I almost did, I admitted. But I realized being broken only hurts me. Building something better is the real revenge. The weekend was perfect. Kids learning about watersheds and ecosystems. Families hiking and camping. People finding peace in nature. On Sunday evening, after everyone left, I walked down to the creek alone. The water ran clear and strong, following its natural path through my land. The dam upstream was still functional, but now it served its original purpose. Managing water for the education center's gardens and programs. I thought about Brandon sometimes, but without anger now. He was in prison paying for his crimes. His life was his own problem. I thought about Candace too. Last I heard, she was working as a receptionist in Florida, her dreams of being a developer gone. She sent me a letter once, apologizing for everything. I never responded. Some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness. Mostly I thought about my grandmother. About the legacy she left me. Not just land but values, strength, resilience, the ability to build something meaningful from nothing. Jordan found me by the creek as the sun was setting. Ready to go? Almost. I just wanted to say thank you. To who? To the land. To my grandmother. To myself, I guess. For having the courage to fight for what was mine. He wrapped his arm around me. You're amazing, you know that? I'm just someone who refused to give up. We walked back to the car as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Tomorrow I would go back to running my business, managing the education center, living my life. But tonight I allowed myself to feel satisfied with everything I'd built. Brandon tried to destroy me. He tried to steal my inheritance and build his empire on my losses. Instead, I destroyed his empire and built something better. Something that would last long after his prison sentence ended. Something that honored my grandmother's memory and helped others. That was the best revenge of all. Not tearing him down, though that happened too. But building myself up. Creating something meaningful. Finding genuine happiness that didn't depend on anyone else. I thought I needed Brandon to be happy. I thought marriage and partnership were the only way to build a life. But I was wrong. The strongest foundation is the one you build yourself. And my foundation was unbreakable. As we drove away from the valley, I looked back one last time at the education center standing in the moonlight. Tomorrow it would be full of life and learning again. But tonight it was mine alone. A testament to survival. To strength. To revenge achieved not through destruction, but through creation. Brandon built 10 houses on my land, thinking he could profit from my loss. I opened the dam and watched his empire wash away. Then I built something better in its place. And that's where my story ends. Not with anger or bitterness, but with peace. With a successful business, A beautiful education center, genuine friends, and a partner who respects me. Brandon's story ended in a prison cell, broke and alone. Mine ended in a valley full of life, surrounded by everything I built myself. That's the difference between theft and creation. Between temporary victory and lasting success. Between building on someone else's foundation and building your own. I am Naomi Harper, owner of Harper Engineering Solutions and the Harper Valley Education Center. Survivor. Builder. Woman who refused to be destroyed by betrayal. And I am happy. Genuinely, completely, permanently happy. Without Brandon. Without Candace. Without anyone who didn't deserve a place in my life. I am enough. My success is enough. My life is enough. And that's the greatest revenge of all.